ascriptive science is actually science that is aimed at maximizing your ability to predict your response and other people's responses and to control your response and other people's responses. It's turning social science into social engineering. Okay? And I'm going to argue that there is a stance that's associated with ascriptive science. There's a stance. You understand what I mean when I say the word stance, right? There's a way of being that is very weird. It's weird. So that's why I spend the whole first chapter of the book talking about nothing but this stance. And this stance is to start with the self, and I've put myself there, okay, in better days, and to take this dissociative step, right? So a psychiatrist, of which there is one here, would look at this and say, oh my God, you're trying to make people ill, right? Because there's a class of disorders called dissociative disorders in the DSM-4-TR, Manual of Psychiatry. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to produce a distance between I, the subject, and me, the object. Okay? I'm producing a distance. And then, in the book, I try to amplify this distance by essentially writing it in the form of a novel, where the I has the name Ask, for ascriptive scientist. Okay? And the me has the name Creature. And the reason why I wanted the me to have the name Creature is that I wanted the observer to be very dispassionate. Very, very as dispassionate as possible and as calculating as possible in manipulating Creature's behaviors for the purpose of understanding them. Okay? So the idea would be to think of yourself as an insect. Okay? Think of yourself as an insect, and you're studying this insect through this prism, which is the set of models. It's a lens, magnifying glass. Okay? And instead of talking of yourself in the first person, talk of yourself as an it. It is doing this and it is doing that. Notice that even if you talk about a third person as an it produces a massive, massive distancing effect. Okay? And then, of course, you have to model this very process. So you have to really put yourself in the position of that insect that you're looking at, and you're trying to understand this creature's behaviors. That's what Ask is trying to do. Understand them. Why? For the purpose of predicting them very precisely, and for the purpose of better controlling them. You're trying to understand and change your rage time constant. Why is this making you laugh? No, we'll come to it later. You're trying to understand, predict, and control your reaction to low blood sugar, or to sexual arousal, or to having eaten a certain kind of cereal this morning, or to having had your honor offended in the context of a group session. Okay? You're trying to understand, predict, and control it. Okay? Now you're going to need help in this. You're going to need help in the form of a set of models, and you might also need help because your memory is not going to be able to hold all of this in mind. But we have this incredible thing called a smartphone and an iPad now. What a fantastic invention, in a nick of time. Okay? So you can lug these things around with massive amount of computational power and actually keep track of your own behavioral portrait, which you have already dissected. Okay? And the other step, and this is it's a very humbling step. It's perhaps an even more humbling step than thinking of yourself as an insect. Okay? Actually, that may be quite humorous to some. The second step is to take a really microscopic view of your own behavior. So the two concepts, the two moves in the book are emotional distoscopy, you're trying to distance yourself from yourself, and behavioral microscopy. How does choice actually happen? Okay? The results, everybody should know, this should be part of the folklore of, I think, every person that functions in society. It's a very nice experiment by Libet and his team, a neurologist, in 1979, who asked subjects, said, within the next 10 seconds or so, squeeze your index finger. anytime, okay? And tell me when you think that you have actually decided to squeeze your finger. Okay? And the way I'm going to get some accuracy, because this all happens in sub 1 second intervals, is I'm going to speed up the hand on a clock by a factor of 30. Okay? So I can measure sub-second time intervals. And tell me what you see on that clock when you feel that you've actually decided to squeeze your finger. And what he finds is that the evoked potential associated with a motor response, the motor neurons, actually come before the subject is consciously aware of having decided to squeeze. Okay? Think about that a bit. Now, if people interpret this as there's no free will, and oh my God, the fundamentals of Western civilization are about to crumble, of course there are ways to salvage free will. This is not about free will. This is about impulse control. Okay? If your consciousness is slow, right, which is what this clearly indicates, then your ability to integrate all of these different impulses that you get from the outside and the impulses that come from the inside is going to be impaired. Okay? By the way, you're probably all curious as to how I can salvage free will, right? You're thinking, how is free will going to be salvaged if this is true? One way to do it is to say that we have veto power. Okay? We don't have the power to initiate, but we have the power to veto. Okay? Which is still pretty good. Not as good as, willing the thing, but you can still will it not to happen. Okay? And you can essentially choose from among all of the impulses that your brain generates which one you're actually going to follow. Okay? Now, if I take this behavioral microscopy seriously, then I can use it to consider something like, I can use it to consider addiction behavior, I can use it to consider depressive episodes, I can use it to consider all kinds of things, but think in particular about behaviors that happen on timescales of minutes to seconds. Itches. Itches happen on seconds to minutes. Okay, so you have an itch, you're going to scratch it. If you scratch it, it's going to turn redder, it's going to get more inflamed, you might bleed, you'll scratch it even more in the future, okay? Nevertheless, it's very difficult not to scratch an itch. Why? Because there is a lapse in conscious control, okay? One way to explain this lapse in conscious control, this is a very simple model, is that you have this larger later reward, which is healing, you have this very smaller sooner reward, which is scratching. And you are here, you are right now, and if I ask you now in your calm, collected state, are you willing to defer the smaller sooner reward for the sake of the larger later reward, you'll say yes. But when it actually comes time and the itch really, really itches, you lapse. Okay? And then you go back into a cool, calm, collected state. Okay? Think about that. It's a failure of impulse control. Okay? Once I have a model, I have a set of remedies immediately associated with it. I can decrease the attractiveness of scratching the itch. I can wear latex gloves, for instance. Okay? Extreme, but effective. Okay? Or I can promise somebody that I will not scratch it. I will increase the larger later reward, and I will decrease the smaller sooner reward by the amount of the shame that I'm going to feel when I breach my promise. Okay? And I can apply the same kind of model to something that's, as I said, even more difficult to control, at least so it seems, which is the experience of pain. I'm not talking about whether or not you scream very loudly if I stick a needle in your hand. Okay? I'm talking about whether or not you feel the pain. And there are ways of actually measuring this. Okay? So if I think of feeling the pain as something that is a problem of impulse control, then my model is going to look like this. Again, it's going to be on the scale of milliseconds to seconds, not of seconds to minutes. Okay? So I have a lapse in my conscious control of the sensory response on the scale of hundreds of milliseconds. And just so you don't think that I'm speaking gibberish, again, Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, 2009, transcendental meditation trainees, even after relatively short sessions, experience much higher pain thresholds. And when I say higher pain thresholds, again, it's not that they don't scream, and it's not that they don't become aggressive. It's actually that they don't feel the pain. Okay? And this is triangulated by fMRI studies that suggest that their brain is also in a state that corresponds to not feeling the pain. Okay? So notice that what I've done is I've taken an idea, a simple idea, it's a model of choice, coupled with a model of impulsiveness, coupled with a model of self-control, and I've applied it at many different time scales. So I've pressed it to the very limits of where it can go. Okay? And I've applied it to the realm of thought, I've applied it to the realm of feeling, and also to behavior. So where is this heading, in my view? It's heading to what I will call personalized social science. Okay? I think that if we put an engineering cap on human development, human control, and human transformation, we can actually build a series, and the technology for it exists today. And I can marry this technology with sensors for your blood glucose levels, for your skin conductance, which measures nervousness, for instance, and anxiety levels. I can measure various hormone levels in your blood. Okay? So I can build the interface and the application and the tool that's going to allow us to intervene in our own lives using the toolkit of models and theories that we have spent the last 150 years building. Okay? I've used an iPad because it's a common application platform. But the project, in the project I see, as I said, I see the book as being just a very small first step in this project, and I think that several firms and startups are taking this forward right now as we speak. The project is to build a scalpel, to build an operating system that allows creatures who have these things inside their skulls. There isn't a single one of us who doesn't. Okay? To essentially become masters as opposed to slaves of their emotional systems and subsystems, of their behavioral repertoire and their perceptual repertoire. And this will proceed by exactly the same steps that allowed mechanical engineering to take a unified body of models called Newtonian science. And instead of asking, but is it really true? And if you look inside masses, you find molecules, and does it apply, and this and that? Yeah, you can do that too. That's a field of physics that's well established and well developed as well. The engineering mindset is to take the Newtonian science and build a locomotive. Okay? You take Newtonian science and you build BMW 7 Series. Okay? That is the project. And this is a project that is fundamentally different, I would put to you, from what we currently use social science models for. And it's also fundamentally different from the way in which you normally think about using these theories in your own life. Right? We don't really take them seriously. They are for writing journal articles. They're not applicable here. Right? Which is not that far from the truth, but they can bite. All you have to do is get very, very serious about tracking, measuring, understanding, controlling, predicting your own behavior. Okay? Obviously, this can be used for something like designing the next generation of weight loss programs. I'm not interested in that. Okay? Obviously, it can be used for chronic pain management. Obviously, it can be used for reducing test-taking anxiety or math anxiety. Okay? Not interested in any one of those single applications. Right? Those are all, I think, to my mind, more or less a form of charlatanism. What is important is enabling every single person to become a lot better at understanding, predicting, controlling their behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Thank you very much. I've gone over time.